Hello and welcome to ASB TDC TV, a product of a partnership between the University of Arkansas Small Business and Technology Development Center and the Northwest Arkansas Council Small Business Emergency Assistance Program. In this series, we are talking with small businesses, experts, and ASB TDC consultants about the relevant and right now topics and solutions for small businesses. I'm Amy Robinson, and today I have Allyson Malone and Chris Case. Chris, you are usually on the other side of this with me, and
Yes.
today you are joining as a guest. So Allyson and Chris, we all joined the Small Business Emergency Assistance Task Force together, and part of the ASB TDC's expansion into these COVID services is to provide specific services outside of business plans and marketing, because we are in a completely different world when it comes to what businesses are going through right now. So Allyson, you specialize in human resources, and Chris, you specialize in change management and communication. And so really today what we're talking about is people. Because that's what our businesses are made of, and we wouldn't function without them. We are not robots or Oompa Loompa functioning in the world. So, Allyson,
Yes.
you have been a part of everything from the beginning in our forum calls we have for restaurants and retailers, and you've also been doing interactions with clients directly. So tell us a little bit about, in the human resources realm, in the era of COVID, some of the top things that you have been helping companies navigate.
Sure thing. Thank you, Amy. So really probably the first thing I would say is early on when most of our businesses were shut down, the thing I helped the most with and the calls I received the most about were helping employees understand and go through the process of the unemployment and what was due, when it was due, how the pandemic unemployment insurance worked. And then a little bit later, once things were a little more up and running from an unemployment perspective for our sole proprietors and independent contractors, again, helping with some unemployment related items for them. Now that businesses are mostly reopening or shifting towards reopening, the unemployment piece has gone away, and it's a lot more questions about bringing employees back, communicating about how to keep them safe, talking about what's expected and hoped from their activities outside of work, again, with an eye towards safety. And then probably most recently, as we all know, we've seen a rise in cases here, at least in Washington County and in Arkansas, probably in general. So I've seen questions and heard questions with a worry towards what do we do if/when one of our employees is infected with COVID-19 or test positive, or comes in contact with someone who is tested positive, or comes in contact with someone who's waiting to hear whether or not their test is positive. So lots of concern about what do we do if and when, probably preparedness.
Absolutely. So even though we're definitely talking about what's happening right now, and that is the hottest topic, in reflecting back on unemployment, and then there was also the era of self-employed unemployment that came on board in May. So if anybody is out there still navigating unemployment, and obviously that goes now until July 31st, and that will end at that point. So we'll have another topic to talk about when that comes up. But
the additional 600.
The additional 600 with that pandemic weekly payment. One of the things that I think I know has come up is a little bit about how to navigate the situations where maybe somebody is making more money on unemployment and maybe not coming back to work, and that may still be the case for some. And so how are you helping businesses, or what kind of advice are you giving them on those situations? When is it okay? When is it not okay? What are some of the parameters around that?
Yeah, and I would probably say my biggest piece of advice on that is to have open and honest communication with your employees. To not be afraid to tackle the harder conversations and to try to get an understanding for what really is the motivator and the driver with your employee. Is it truly the additional funds that they're getting from unemployment? And we've seen many where that is the case, and we've talked to many employers who've been creative with some of the PPP money they have received, and they have increased pay, they have moved to salary, where in past times that there was a focus on tipped employees. So we've seen a lot of creativity with our restaurant owners about how to shift their pay models to give more money in the hands of the employees so that they are able to come back to work and still pay their bills. So that's been one huge thing. And then on the other front, we've just seen employees who just don't feel safe coming back to work yet. And again, it's been more often than not in the restaurant environment, or employees who are in higher risk. We just talked to a couple restaurants where that was their case just as recently as yesterday, but they've seen a surge in their customer demand, so that their customers are coming back and the restaurants are busier. So we spent some time talking about, again, open and honest communication with those employees who still aren't ready to come back or have health conditions where it's just not safe for them to come back to work. That it's okay for employers to have an honest conversation and say, that is fine, I would never force you to come back to work, but we are at a place where we need to start hiring and backfilling. And that was as recently as yesterday.
Yeah, and there are some other measures, there's some other laws, there are some other financial support mechanisms to help employers when people can't come back to work, and kind of what it is that they're tasked with as an employer, what they should and shouldn't do. And I think that kind of bridges a little bit of the topic between policies and procedures. All of these things that people have had in place for so long, now they're having to navigate and rewrite the rule book, kind of, and some of those things. So what is it that, how is it that you can help or direct people in some of the things that creating those policies and procedures that they can follow, not just now, but, as things are coming up?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest change we're seeing are policies and procedures around health. Never probably in our wildest dreams do we imagine we'd be temperature checking our employees before they were cleared to work for the day and things of those nature. So I think there's all sorts of policies and procedures and practices that are coming into place about bringing your employees back into work and having really that contract and agreement with them about what you are doing as an employer from a health and safety perspective and what you're looking for them to do. And again, I think quite a bit of that goes back to open and honest and frequent and communication, whether it's in person during shifts, emails, texts, Slack, whatever the organization's vehicle of communication is. It's just, I don't think in this time a way to over communicate.
Absolutely, which I think is the perfect segue into talking with Chris a little bit about communication. A lot of these policies and procedures and rules and things like that feel really impersonal, and so they feel regulated. And so depending on what kind of culture you had coming into this pandemic, how do you maintain the balance between having a healthy workplace and having a friendly workplace, and how do you help people really literally navigate the changes that are happening every single day? Something is different and new every day.
Right. Well, and I think the bottom line here is there's nothing normal about what we're going through. That means our behaviors, how people are acting, our experiences, our situations. So we have got to really give each other a break during this time, because Amy, you might be having a great day one day and I'm having a horrible day. And Allyson, you're having a great week. So we always are trying to gauge ourselves and compare ourselves to other people. And one of the conversations I'm having a lot of is people saying, well, I feel like I have to turn into a therapist or a psychologist or psychiatrist. And, I hate to say it, but in a way, the human side of business has to come out a little bit more than maybe has previously been thought of. So have those conversations. Allyson hits it on the head every time. Have those conversations, communicate, be transparent. Now is the time to really rebuild your team even stronger, because every one of us is scared. Every one of us has the unknown. And so right now, as an employer, as a friend, as a coworker, is really an optimal time for us to start rebuilding that trust even more, and the motivation. And one thing I always say is I always talk about the William Bridges transition model. And let me share a screen just really quick, because it kind of gives you a bit of an idea.
That would be great. So anybody just listening, because we do have an audio version and a video version, if you're just listening, we'll make sure that this is available to you along with the other, the audio link that we're sharing.
Perfect. Well, I've talked a lot about, probably in the last 20 years, a lot about change and change management and the human side of change. And there's a lot of different models out there and philosophies, but I love the William Bridges transition model, because especially right now, what it's doing is it's showing us the psychological part of how we're transitioning through these phases. If you'll notice, psychologically, we really go through the 3 different phases. We go through the ending phase, the neutral zone, and then the new beginning. The ending phase, I think, for the majority of the country really happened in the very beginning. It was kind of thrust upon us. It was a shock. We kind of went through that phase a little bit faster than what we normally would if we're just maybe upgrading our software or acquiring another company. The neutral zone is the hard zone. And that is when, if you understand the brain, the stress hormone that is released is called cortisol. And what happens is kind of our fight or flight. It regulates our moods, our feelings, kind of our decision making. And what happens is when we go through that neutral zone, a lot of times that stress hormone is released temporarily. And so then we can kind of adjust. What's happening with a pandemic, and we never would have seen this coming a million miles away, but we're living in that neutral zone a lot longer than what we normally would for a normal change. And so the release of that cortisol is now producing anxiety, which is turning into depression, which is turning into a lot of the social side of things that I think I fear the most of coming out of all this. But giving each other a break right now is so key, because we are all at a heightened awareness of stress, and it's physiological. It's not something we're making up. And so, like Allyson said earlier, we've got to communicate, we've got to support people, and we've got to be there for people. So as employers, I hate to say it, some of you are uncomfortable stepping into the human aspect of it a little bit more than normally. We could hide behind the policies and the procedures, but now's the time to do it. And I promise you, your team, your employees, your culture, your organization will be all the better if you do focus on this a little bit more. So that's kind of, Amy, my little spiel of the psychological and the transitioning and the emotional side of everything. And just to back up what Allyson said earlier, that it all plays together and it comes together beautifully.
Yeah, and we really just need to give each other some space and grace, and really understand that. What do you think from a communication standpoint when you talk about building a better culture, and we're talking to our employees internally, and to Allyson's point about really talking to them constantly, because they need to hear from us constantly, and you saying that they feel like they're somebody's therapist. What are some things that you would recommend, like some efficient but personal ways for people to stay in contact, let people know that their employees, that they care about them, and still get business done and still be healthy and safe?
Well, a lot of these employers know their people. They've been working with them for quite a while. And so first of all, a communication isn't kind of a one size fits all. I hate to say it, because we're really trying to be more efficient and trying to get more done with less and more stress and everything else. But knowing your employees and knowing how to communicate individually with each one of them. I might love a text where, Amy, you might love a phone call. Mm-hmm. I think that just the consistent communication, maybe there's some kind of a change or some kind of a new health safety feature that you're going to implement in your your restaurant, let's say, for example, you email that all out to everybody, but then you know who to follow up with. You know who the people are that might need that phone call. You know who the people are where the email is enough. But again, it's one of those times where as bosses, leaders, employers, business owners, we're going to be doing a little bit more work right now, but it will pay off just beautifully in the end if you do.
And I really think that that was a really good differentiating comment on consistency as opposed to constant. Because I think that constant communication could really like blow your mind if you feel like you're and you're just saying the same thing over and over again, which is okay too, but consistent communication. So that's something that you can almost, anticipate and even get ahead of when you're being so consistent in a communication. So I think that's exceedingly important for sure.
It is. And knowing who that you maybe need to have constant communication with, that one or two people compared to consistent information and conversations, but the majority of it is consistent. You hit that right on the head. That's exactly what it is.
Awesome. So Allyson, one of the things that you mentioned that's coming up is really people saying, okay, what do I do and how do I do it? Where's the rule book for what happens if an employee gets sick? And just kind of how to navigate that. So what is it that you have found as some good things that you're telling and sharing with people?
Yeah, I think the most important thing probably is to have a plan or a checklist, or probably a checklist is maybe the best way to phrase it. And there's probably different categories of what to do. And it may vary based on your industry. It might be a little different if you're a restaurant versus a retail store. But I think the most important thing is to act quickly. If somebody comes to you and they themselves have tested positive, they believe they've been exposed, or they've been to someone who's tested positive, or they've been exposed to someone who is waiting to hear whether or not they have tested positive. I think probably the most important thing is to move pretty quickly. What you want to do is, of course, minimize the chance that this person will then expose others in your workplace to COVID. So you're going to want to remove that person in a nice, calm manner from the workplace as quickly as humanly possible, while they're waiting to figure out whether or not they have, in fact, been exposed. And there's a couple laws, one in particular that I want to make sure, because they're going to probably need to be quarantined or at least out of the workplace for up to probably the 14 days. It's possible they've been exposed to someone who they think was exposed, and then that person's test comes back negative, and it's okay to bring them back into the workplace. But I think it's a lot of contingency planning. It's important to know that there are a couple laws that are relevant. Probably the most relevant one is, I've been asked, like, how does that person get paid? Do they get paid? What if we don't have sick leave?
Right.
And there is something called, I just want to make sure that I'm calling it the correct name, emergency paid sick leave, which came into effect on April 1st of 2020 as part of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And what it requires, I just want to read it to make sure I'm getting it right, but it requires employers with less than 500 employees to provide employees with 2 weeks or 80 hours of paid leave at the employee's regular rate of pay if the employee is unable to work because the employee is quarantined or experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and seeking a medical diagnosis. So and this is even if you as an employer don't have paid sick leave. And the way in which employers get reimbursed for that is through a tax credit. So a lot of steps involved with that. I would say
open financial mechanism that helps support the small businesses in that. Yeah.
So keeping in close touch with the employee, if they believe that they've been in contact with your other employees, to let the other employees know that they have potentially been exposed to COVID-19, Do not tell them who it is. Of course, if your workplace is 2 or 3 people and one person's missing, it'll probably become obvious, but it is really important to protect the confidentiality of the person who's come forward.
Excellent.
And then, making sure that they can get access to the tests.
Yeah. And one of the things I've heard you talk a lot about through the course of this is documentation, making sure that, you're documenting everything.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody doesn't want to come back to work, that you document why the email that you offered them their job back and they chose not to, or the reason that they chose not to. And then all the way to this, which is, if they become sick, because contact tracing, of course, is another thing that is really, really important in this time.
Right. So to be a responsible employer and keeping track of those things and who they may have come in contact with, so that you can then advise that person, you may have been exposed through the workplace to somebody who is awaiting their test results. So that person can go.
Do you have any resources out there, websites, lists, anything that people can refer to that have been helpful?
The one, oddly, that I have been referring to is just that I happen to find on a Google search. It is a lawyer, Cozen, C-O-Z-E-N, O'Connor, not even in the state of Arkansas, but he or she puts out a pretty good list of, if it happens in the workplace, do this, then, workers' comp would be appropriate. He or she, I don't even know, really puts in a couple good if-then scenarios, what to do, how important confidentiality is, moving with some speed. And I do think it's important for employers to take a look at this so that if and when it happens, they've got a plan, but they can also communicate before they're in an emergency situation with their employees about, if this happens, here's what we'll do. Here's how you'll get paid. Here's the time off we'll ask you to take. Here's the cleaning and the sanitation, and we will or will not close for this period of time, and we will notify the authorities, so that your employees can have some peace of mind that you are planning for, what might happen when.
You're prepared.
Yeah, and Chris, that really takes that unknown gap out of it, right? So it's not that, change does happen. The challenge with that, that change cycle that we go through is the unknown, and getting comfortable with that. And so the more that we can mitigate that, the better. How do you propose that, in a situation like this, when this happens, how people communicate with their employees while they're gone? I mean, all of this is very awkward. We're bumping elbows. We're like, none of us really know how to act. And so in a situation where, getting this was not anybody's fault, go out, it's not cooties. It's not a societal judgment that they have it. And so how do you feel like an employer can best support them if they have had to leave work for those purposes?
Again, you got to remember that everybody's different, but regular check-ins. Allyson kept saying, communicate. And, this is the time to really show that you care about the people side of your business, which I think is the most important part of the business. And, we've got the financial kind of problems and issues that are coming up, but it's going to be the social side that I think is going to really devastate the majority of us, especially those of us that are in the people part of the business. Yeah. But much to show that you care, to reach out, to check in with those individuals. And I mean, I know it sounds basic. It's just like communication 101, but I think we need to be reminded, because we're all getting so wrapped up now in, we're trying to reopen and we're trying to, social distance, and then it goes to 66%. I mean, so we're inundated with facts and numbers and data. Just keep in mind that you got to put the people first. This is the time, and I've always said it, you learn a lot more and create more optimism and importance and benefits in the valleys than you do the mountains. And this is one of those deepest valleys that we're going to really hit. And so take this opportunity, because we're not going to, hopefully, knock on wood, be presented with another change of this magnitude. So take this opportunity to rebuild your relationships with your individuals. It's important.
That is amazing. And that is exactly exactly what I think the note that we need to end on, which is that it is an opportunity to build those relationships and build that cohesiveness in a team and that connection. So thank you both so much for today, and thank everyone for joining us. If you have a suggested topic, a question that you need answered, if there's somebody that you'd like to hear from, or if you have a story that you'd like to share, please contact us at bizhelp, that's BUSHELP @uark.edu, and put TV in the subject line. If you are interested in benefiting from our free one-on-one consulting assistance, hearing from Chris or Allyson or any number of our financial or business consultants, please sign up at sbtdc@uark.edu. Until next time, we'll see you later.
Thanks, guys.